In today's video, I am going to show you how you can subset or split VCF files using the tool BCFTOOls. And the criteria for splitting or subsetting for this tutorial is the sample ID or the sample name. And so, in order for you to follow this tutorial, you need to make sure that you have installed BCFTOOls on your PC. That is the only requirement for this tutorial. You can install BCFTOOls using Anaconda, or you can also compile from the source code. And I have separate tutorials that show you how to install BCFTOOls using any of these approaches in Linux. So just watch them. The links to those tutorials are in the description box. So just go and then just watch them and then set up your PC. Proceed. So here is the page where you can read more about BCFTOOls and how to use them. I will leave this link in the description box so that if you want to read more about it, just go there. Now, we will begin by first downloading an example data. Okay, so we are going to use a VCF file which is available on my GitHub repo. And this is the page. I'll leave the link in the description box for you to also visit this repo and then download it. For this exercise, we are going to use this file, all.snipsindex.vcf.gz. This file is what we are going to use. To download it, you first have to click on it. You can also double click. And then you'll be sent to another page. On this page, move to the right side. Just follow my cursor. Move to the right side and you'll see a download button here. So there's a button labeled download. That is what we are going to use. I'll show you two approaches to use to download this file. The first approach is used if you want to download using the browser. What you do is to click on it and then you'll be asked to save. So I'll save it on my PC. Make sure you save it in a location where you have access to the file. Okay, so there's one way to download the file. The other approach is used if you are working on a remote server where you have access to only the terminal or the command line. For that, you need to have the download link. Okay, so that is what you need. So to get the download link, still bring your cursor over to the button. And then what you do is to just right click it. Okay, so once you right click it, you go to this copy link here and then just click on it. Okay. So I am using a Firefox browser, so this is how I do it. But using the other browsers to be able to get the download link. So once you have this download link, you move to the terminal and continue from there. So on the terminal, the first thing I will do is to create a working directory. So I will say make the vcfs. I will then cd to it. The reason why I do this is to separate files that I'll be generating for this exercise from other files on my PC. Okay, so doing this helps you to organize your files and prevent accidental removal of files and modification of files. So that is why I create directories for every project that I do. So now it's time to download the data. So I will use wget for it. So I'll say wget and I'll supply it with the download link of the file, the VCF file. And then I'll run it. Please take note that aside wget, there are other tools that can help you to download files from the internet. Okay, so just use an appropriate tool to get your data downloaded. So let's run this command. So now the data has been downloaded. Let's first clear the screen and continue. So let's do an ls and you'll see this there. So it's now time to start the work. Now we are using sample names or sample IDs to do the subsetting or splitting. And so what we need to do first is to get the sample IDs. I have a separate tutorial that also shows you how to get sample IDs from VCF. You can also just watch that. I go into details with that one, but this I'll just use just some few codes here. So let's first get the sample IDs. So to get the sample IDs using BCFTOOLS, we use the command BCFTOOLS query -L, and then you specify the VCF file. So mine, there's the name here, and then I'll just execute this command here. So this will list the sample IDs here for you. But then it's important, or it's also advisable to store or to save the output here, this sample ID here, this list here, to save it in a text file so that we can easily go for it without referring to the VCF files again. So what we are going to do next is to still get the sample IDs, but this time we will save or store it in a text file. And so that means this same command we used here, I'll just use this greater than here, showing that we want to redirect the outputs to a file, and then I'll give the file name. So let's say samples. Let's leave it like the sample.txt. So this is how I'm going to do it, so that I have the sample IDs here. So I'll just execute this, and then it's there. So if you do an ls now, do an ls, and then you have this here. Let's clear the screen first. So ls again, and you have it there. Let's cut or display it. So we say cut sample.txt, and you have it there. So here we have the text file here. That's what we have. So now we have the sample IDs available. So let's start. So to do the subsets or to do the splitting, let's assume that we want to just split and get the variant for just this sample here, NA21112. So to do that, we use the BCFTOOLS view. So we can say BCFTOOLS view, and then we indicate -S. So -S means that we want to specify a sample ID. Okay, so and that's what it is. Let me just go back to the manual here to show you how that one is. It's also here. Let's come here. So when you come to BCFTOOLS view, you can have all the items here. So just come here and you can just search for all the other options here. This BCFTOOLS view, that's what we are using. So we have all these options there for you to use, but we are just scratching the surface here. So if you want to have more details about it, just go read, and you can look at how to add some advanced options also with it. Okay, so let's go back. Yeah, so now we are here again, and we said we are going to use this sample name here. So that means we are going to subset and get the variance for only this one here. So we have BCFTOOLS view -S, it's lower case, and then we indicate the sample ID. So that is NA21112. That's how it is. And then we specify the VCF file, which is what? This one, all.snapsindels.vcf.gz. So I will specify it here. And then we have it here. So just execute this, and then you see that you have them here. Okay. Now, what we did here will only display the variants, but then most of the time we want to get a file. We want to save the output to a file. Let's clear the screen first. And so to save or to store the output to a file, still the same command here, and then I'll show you a number of ways to do it, but we'll just use the one that's are just simple to understand. So we say -O, because we want to store, we can indicate the formats. Now here we have 4 formats that you can output. You can have the BCFTOOLS, you can have the uncompressed, we can have GZ, and then others. So I'll just do just a few of them here. So if you want to also get more information, let's clear it first here. If you want to get more information about the BCFTOOL, you can just look at this one here and then just enter, and you have all the options here with some descriptions here for you as well. So here is what I was using, the output type here. So we have BUZV, so compressed BCF, uncompressed, compressed VCF, and then all that. So I'll use this one here. That's what I'm going to use. And we also have -O as output file. We are going to use that option as well. So let's go back and then just re-enter the command again. So I said BCFTOOLS, it was here somewhere. Yes. So I'll add the -O and then I'll indicate Z like this. And then I'll say -O, lowercase again, and I'll use the sample name here again, 21112.vcf.gz. I'll just give it this name here. So that's what I'm going to do. So once you have this, you can just execute this command here. So because we are saving to an output file, nothing will be displayed. So if you don't have anything displayed, that means the command was probably executed correctly. So let's do an ls. You do an ls and you see what's a new file generated, this one here. That's it. Now you can just confirm that there is only one sample here. And again, you can use BCFTOOLS query. So you say BCFTOOLS query -L, and you indicate this one here. And you have it here. So notice only one sample ID was displayed. So we are on the right track. So this is how easy it is to use BCFTOOLS to do your splitting. We are still moving on. Now, what we did here was to just add a single sample, but you may want to include more than one sample. And so with BCFTOOLS, it allows you to specify more than one sample with the same command here. So let's just display the first 3 IDs for this one here, the samples.txt here. So we want to use this 3 here. And so if you want to use more than one sample ID, you have to separate them with comma. And so let's try that one here. So let's say BCFTOOLS view -s, and then you specify them here. You specify them, separate with comma, get this one here. I'm just copying and pasting them here. Then separate with a comma. So once you have this, that's it. You can now continue with the rest of the activity. Because now we are subsetting 3 samples. Let's say these are the samples of interest. Now we come here, you can just specify. Now when we come here, let me also say that even though here I use this one here, you can also bring this one last. So I'll try out a different variation here. So I'll say -O Z -O NA. Now this time we will not use NA. Let's just say subset.vcf.gz. If you have a different name too, you can just use that, but I'll just say subset.vcf.gz. So I have it here, and then I specify the original VCF file where we want to do the subsets from. So all.snips like this. And so once we have it like this, we just execute. And then it is also done for you nicely. So if you do an ls, you will have it here. So notice this one here. And you can confirm by what? Using the BCFTOOLS query. So we say BCFTOOLS query -L subsets this, and you have your 3 samples here. So these are cool things you can do to manipulate your VCF files. So this is how we do it. Okay, now there are situations where you may have several. Let's say you have a VCF file that contains about 100 samples and you want to subset about 50 of them. So in our case, we have about 10. Let me just do this just to get a number of samples. In our case, we have 11 samples. So let's say the 11 samples, we want to subset this one here. But then in real world situations, you may have several of them, and using this comma separated approach here will lead to the process being cumbersome. So you can just specify a text file that has the samples you want to subset, and then BCFTOOLS can do that also for you. I think that one is here. Let me show you. We use the -S. I'll just do it here. BCFTOOLS view. There is a -S here that you can use to specify a text file that contains your samples. You can also add some options to exclude which samples to get, and that one is also here. Using this option here, you can just exclude them. So these are things you can do. So let's proceed. Let's clear the screen first. So let's do an ls again, and we have it here. So this time, instead of using the -S, which is the lowercase s, we are going to specify a text file that contains the samples of interest. So let's first remove this VCF file. We'll come back to it. And let me say that the rm command permanently deletes your file, so you should be careful when using it. But for this tutorial, we are just using it. And that is why we created a directory where all these files are stored in. So let's do an ls again. So this time, we are going to what? Get this same, let me issue this one here. We want to subset this 3. But this time, let's say you have several hundreds of these samples here, then it becomes very cumbersome. And so what we can do is to just put them in a text file and then just use. So that is what we are going to use. We are going to put this ones here in a text file, a separate text file, and then just push that one to BCFTOOLS. So I'll say this, and I'll put it here, subset.txt. So I'm doing a subset of it here. Okay, I'll just do a subset here. So I'll execute, do an ls, and you see this subset here. So ls subset. Okay, this one here, this is what we need. So let's do a cut, and you see that we have our subset here. And so what we are going to do is that we are going to call BCFTOOLS view, and then just push in this text file for it to do the subset for us. And so what do? We say BCFTOOLS view, and this time we say -S, that's uppercase, and then we indicate what? Subset.txt, like this. And then we add our options here, subset.vcf.gz, and then we specify the original VCF file here, and we execute. So that is also done for us. So we have what? ls here. Okay, so that's how we do it. So again, let's query. You can say BCFTOOLS query -L subsets.vcf.gz, and then just get it done here for us. Okay, so this is how we do it. So these are cool things you can do with BCFTOOLS. Now let's clear the screen and then continue. In the next examples, I am going to show you how you can exclude samples from a VCF file. So if you want to exclude samples, we still use the same BCFTOOLS view, but this time when we are specifying the sample IDs, we add the caret symbol, this symbol here, and then we also add the sample ID. That's how we do it. Now let's get the full detail from the BCFTOOLS view hub. So BCFTOOLS view, and then let's scroll up to where we specify the samples, -s and then -s. So here we have exclude, and we have what? The caret symbol here. So exclude with the caret symbol prefix, meaning that you begin the sample ID with this symbol. The same applies to where you are specifying a text file. So if you are using this for each of the samples you specify, you have to include the caret symbol. If it's a text file, for each of these samples, you have to add the carets to their name. So it has to be first. That's why it's a prefix. Now let's look at a real world situation. Let's clear the screen. Let's do an ls. Let's display these samples here. Let's say we want to exclude this sample from the list, from this data we have. So when we use the BCFTOOLS, we have to add the sample ID in this format. So this is how we do it. So let's look at the command to do this. So we say BCFTOOLS view -s. Then we add our sample ID. The rest are the same. We add our output format, output file. Let's say subset2.vcf.gz. Let's specify the VCF file from which we want to do the extraction. So we have it this way. So let's run it. Now it's done. Do an ls and you will see this file created. This is the new file that was generated. Now we are going to compare the samples in the original file here and then the one we created by excluding this sample, just so we know that we have what we expect. So let's say BCFTOOLS, we are counting the samples. Query -l all.snips index this. So this is the original file here. Let's count. We say wc-l and we have it here, 11. Let's do the same for the new file. BCFTOOLS query -l subset 2. We have this. Let's count. We have what? 10 of them. So this is how we do it. Let's display the samples themselves. We start with this one here. That means we are not going to add this pipe command and do the wc-l. This is the first one. This is the second one. So notice with the original one, the first one, we had what? This sample there. Here, it's no longer there. So this is how we do the exclusion. So we've done it. Okay, so now let's clear the screen and then proceed. Now you can also exclude more than one sample from the VCF file. So let's look at how to do it. Let's display the samples again. So let's say we want to exclude this sample here, the first one here, and the second one here. We can still do it in BCFTOOLS. So to do that, we still issue the same BCFTOOLS view -s. And then when we come here, we still add our caret symbol. And then we indicate our samples. So this is the first sample here. Let's just cross-check to see that it's the same thing here. So we have it here. And then the other samples too, we add by including the comma. We separate them with a comma. So we add it here. Let's add this one here. Let's just copy and then paste it here. So this is how we do it. So once you have this symbol here, that means all other samples that follow will be excluded. So once we are done with this, we just issue our options here. So output format gz, and then output file name, let's say subset 3.vcf.gz. Let's just put it this way. And then we call and specify our VCF file, and then we run it. So let's run this and see how things go. That is also done. So let's do an ls, and you will find that we have the sample file here. Okay, so there's it. So there's a new file that was created. And so from here, we can just query. So let's say BCFTOOLS query. Let's query and find the number of samples here just to confirm. So we say subset 3.vcf.gz, and then we run it. So you notice that the first two are not there because these are the ones that we excluded. We can count and we see that it is what? 9. So this is how we exclude more than one sample from the VCF file. So this is how we do it. So now let's clear the screen and continue. Now, instead of specifying the sample IDs on the command line, we can also specify a text file that contains or that has the list of sample IDs we want to be excluded from the VCF data. And so that is what we are going to look at next. Let's do an ls first just to get our files. Let's display the sample again. So again, we are going to repeat and exclude these two. So this is what we are going to do. Let's first subset this list here and then just output this sample IDs into a different text file. So let's say head-n2 samples.txt. Let's put it as what? exclude.txt. So these are the samples we want excluded. So let's display it here. Yes, so these are the samples we want excluded. So instead of specifying them just as we did previously with this one here, we are going to rather specify a text file here. We are going to specify a text file here because in real situations, you may have a long list of samples you want excluded, and therefore we are looking at how to do that. So to do that, we still issue the same BCFTOOLS view. We say -s, and then when we come here, we indicate with our caret sign here or symbol, and then we specify the file name, the text file. So we say exclude.txt. So this caret symbol here lets us know that we want to exclude these samples. So from here, we continue with what? Our output format, our output file name. This time, let's say subset 4.vcf.gz. And then we specify the VCF file from which we want to do the extraction and subsets. So we run this command and then it's done. So let's do an ls and you will see this file here. So let's query and find the samples here and count them. So let's say BCFTOOLS query -l subset 4.vcf.gz. So notice that we no longer have these two samples there. So this is how we also exclude samples from a VCF file. So it's very, very simple and easy to do. And so that's how we do it. So these are things you can do to just manipulate and get the desired samples and variants for your subsequent analysis. So let's continue. So let's move on to the next activity. Before that, let's clear the screen. So to help us do the splitting, we will use one of the BCFTOOLS plugin called Splits, which is here. This one here, that is what we are going to use to do the splitting. Now I'll leave the link to this page in the description so that you can just use that to also read more about the BCFTOOLS plugin. So now let's go back to the command line and then continue from there. So first of all, let's look at how we can call the plugins. So to call a BCFTOOLS plugin, we need to add a prefix to it. And so because we are using the split plugin, I'll show you how to call it. So we say BCFTOOLS plus splits. There are other ways to call them, but we will use this one for the meantime because we just want to make it very simple. So this is how we call it. So let's call this and look at the help statements here. So these are the statements to show you how to use this plugin. And these are examples for you to just check, but we will keep it simple. We are going to do some simple commands, and later on in future videos, I'll look at more advanced forms of splitting. So with the BCFTOOLS plus splits plugin, if you are looking at samples, if you are interested in samples, we use the -s. This is what I found. I could not find the -s, that's the lowercase s. So that means that we have to specify a text file that contains the samples of interest. So that is what we are going to look at. So there are other options here to get regions and others, but these are things we look at in future videos. But just read about it. Just go to the page and then just read more about the usage of this plugin. So let's clear the screen and then continue. Now we will begin with this. Let's do a cut of the samples we stored or saved earlier. These are the samples in our VCF file. Let's do an ls again. These are the samples here. So let's say you want to split this VCF file here into samples, into individual samples. We have the samples already listed here. So this is how we do it. We call it BCFTOOLS plus splits -s, and then we specify the file that contains the samples. In this case, samples.txt. And then we indicate our output file formats. We also indicate -o. So here, -o represents a directory. With the BCFTOOLS view, -o represents an output file, but here it represents a directory. So this is one of the differences between the BCFTOOLS split plugin and then the BCFTOOLS view. So take note of that. So with the -o, you specify an output directory. So let's say let's use split rather. Let's say split. So what we have here, BCFTOOLS, when you enter the command with the split plugin, BCFTOOLS will look out for this directory. If it exists, fine. If it doesn't exist, it will create that directory. In our case here, this split directory does not exist, and so BCFTOOLS will create it for us. Now we have this specified, so we just now specify the VCF file that we want the extraction to be done, and so we have it this way, and so we execute it. Now it is done. Let's do an ls, and you see what's a directory here which contains the individual samples. So let's do an ls into it, and you see that each of them is here. You can also verify each of them to find out the number of samples there. Let's just look at one of them here. So let's say BCFTOOLS query -l splits HG 00, and we have it this way. So we have just one sample here for this one here. Okay, so that's how we do. You can just verify and find out. So let's just count them here again. Star.gz. We pipe and say wc-l, and it will be 11, just as we had with what? The samples here. So it's 11 because we have 11 samples specified in that file. So this is how we do the splitting. So let's clear the screen first and then continue. So it's not just about splitting, but you can also split and rename the samples. And so that's what we are going to look at next. So to split and rename, this time we are going to use just 2 samples here so that it becomes much easier. So let's call the BCFTOOLS plus split again. So we have the options here. Here you can split and then just rename it here. There are different formats here. So with this one, with this sample here, you just maintain the name. With the second sample here, you call it, and then what? You just specify this, and then you can come here. You can just maintain this one here, and with sample 2, sample 3, you give them new names. So these are things you can do. It's just a matter of you being creative and knowing the rules, and you can just do some complex commands here. But we'll just look at a few of them here. So let's look at situations where we would like to rename some of the samples. So that means we are going to split and then rename the samples here. So let's look at them here. So we have it here. So let's go back. So let's clear the screen. Yeah, so let's do an ls. We are going to use the subsets here. We have 3 of them here. So these are the 3 we are going to use. So let's just make a copy. So I'll just say cp subset.txt and then just make it splits rename.txt. I'll edit it. So I'll say nano splits rename.txt here. So let me just use a tab. That's 4 spaces. So I'll say sample 1 here. Let me say sample 2 here. Let me say sample 3. There are lots of things you can do here. It's just your imagination. So that's how I'll do this one here. So here our split, so these are the samples in the original file, and when we split we want to rename them to this one. So what will happen is that renaming will be done, and then the output files will also be this one here. So let's look at how that is done. We are just saving it. I use the nano command. You can use any text editor also. So we say BCFTOOLS plus splits -s. Let's say splits rename.txt -oz-o. Here, let's specify the output directory as split rename as well. Let's call the VCF file. Let's run this. Now it is done. Let's do an ls. So we have this directory created. Let's do an ls in that directory, and you see that it has been renamed. So let's query one of them. Let's say BCFTOOLS query-l splits rename /sample1, and you notice it's here. So the BCFTOOLS plus splits does a lot of things for you. So it's, I would say, an extension of the BCFTOOLS view command and then other commands to help you do additional tasks. So that's how we do the splitting and then renaming as well. So I mean, you can just look at it. There's another option here. Let's do a BCFTOOLS plus splits. So what we did was this. So here we stored the individual files here, individual sample names or sample IDs. Each of them was in a different line, but you can have this here where we have two samples separated by a comma, and so the names here should also be separated by a comma. You can just try them. We made it simple. Just try and experiment. Now with this option here, you can have a sample, its new name, and then the name of the output file. There is something you can also do. So let's try this. We'll just try with this other option here, where you do a split, rename, and also store in a customized name. So let's try that one. We are just exploring lots of things here with the BCFTOOLS, which is very, very cool. Let's clear the screen. Do an ls. This time we are still going to use the split rename txt. We just make a copy and then edit it. So let's say cp splits rename.txt. Let's just say splits customize.txt. Let's name it this way. Let's edit it. Let's customize. So here we have what's the name in the original VCF file where we are going to do the subset from, the new name, and then the output file. So I'm using a tab. So I just use a tab key here to get a tab character here, which is like 4 spaces, or depend on the settings of your system. It might be 2 spaces or 3 spaces, but it's a tab key that I'm using here. So let's say file 1, let's come here, file 2, let's come here, file 3. Let's save it. We've customized it. So here, let's call BCFTOOLS splat. Let's call BCFTOOLS plus splits -s splits customize.txt -oz-o. That's the directory. Let's say splits customize. We specify the main VCF file like this. Let's run it. It's done. Let's do an ls, and you see it here. So here, let's do an ls again, split, customize. So we have here file 1, file 2, file 3. So in this, when you query, you see that it retains the new name. So we say BCFTOOLS query -L split customize / let's look at file 1. And notice what the sample name is, this one here. So these are things you can do. I mean, by just looking at the rules, you can just combine a number of these options here to do lots of things here. So that's how we do is to add some custom names here to it. So these are ways you can split and also pre-process or to process your files when you are doing this split. So these are cool things you can also do. So I think it's been good doing these tutorials for you.